Warning, the stories you are about to hear may be disturbing and are not for the faint of heart. Please listen with caution. Hello, I'm your host Tabby, and you're listening to Animal Rescue Horrors. Chilling stories about some of the most disturbing sights I have seen while opening my heart and home to animals I have rescued. These stories will be a good reminder on why you should never buy animals and always adopt when you are ready to take on a companion animal. We are going to first start off with a classic story I've shared multiple times about how I got my first rescue animal, a small tabby cat by the name of Waffles. Her origin story ain't as cute as her innocent breakfast name. Waffles lived on a farm with a small group of cats. Now, when you hear the word farm, you may think of those happy, carefree places where many species of animals live free in harmony, right? Well, this particular farm didn't even come close to being child-friendly. This place was a dairy farm, and not a very good one. All of the animals there were starved to a point where they're eating garbage and fresh cow corpses. But it gets worse. One animal in particular, a dog that was supposed to protect the animals, was so starved it was trying to eat the other animals alive. This dog chased the cats, tore chunks out of the dairy cows alive while they're in their pens, and even killed a rabbit by pulling its leg through the cage it was in, breaking the rabbit's leg and completely keeping it from getting food or water. The cows didn't only have the dog to worry about. The humans at that farm were also very mean to the cows. There was one time a man kicked a cow so hard in her udders, her blood mixed with her milk. This farm was a real nightmare that I used to visit every day because my mom had a friend who worked there. And every time I came there, Waffles would come to me. I met Waffles when my mom picked her up and handed her to me to comfort me when I was crying from separation anxiety. Since then, we grew attached to each other. Eventually, me and my mom saw the animal abuse happen more and more at the farm, especially to Waffles. We had enough. So when no one was looking, we drove up one day, opened the car door, and let Waffles hop in. She knew we were going to take her away from that farm, and that's what we did. We took her to a better home with us. She is currently still with us today. Our next story is about two cats that were also rescued from the outdoors, but in different situations. The first one is about a Maine Coon ragdoll mix we call Stormy, because of his gray and white fur pattern and how fluffy he is. Stormy didn't have as bad of a start as Waffles, but he didn't live a bad life as long as Waffles did either. Stormy is born in the roof of an old shed with 3 other siblings. However, one of the siblings didn't make it after being caught in the installation of the shed and suffocating. The other 3 cats made it, however. 2 of the kittens were rehomed, and the mom ended up sadly running away after a while, leaving Stormy, who also joined Waffles in their home. Then there's Winslow, a Maine Coon tabby mix. Again, his start also wasn't as horrible as Waffles, but he didn't have it like Stormy either. Winslow was dumped by his previous owner, who we discovered in a Facebook post was trying to give Winslow away, along with other outdoor cats. My mom was the one who managed to catch Winslow. When we got him in the house, he was so malnourished and so dehydrated that he couldn't even stand. He would have died in the woods if we didn't find him when we did. I actually had to hand feed him and get him to drink water from a bottle cap to get him to realize that the liquid was safe. Just like Stormy and Waffles, he too got luxury living with us. All 3 cats are still with us today. Now we have a few more rescue stories for you before we meet our guest. But these ain't your average felines like we discussed in the 3 previous stories. Our first non-feline rescue story is about a sulfur-crested cockatoo named Moxie, one of the most complex creatures in the domestic animal world, and I happen to live with one. Everyone says parrots will need to be rehomed a lot due to their long lifespans. They're correct. As we know so far, I'm Moxie's 3rd home. We don't know Moxie's full origin, but this is what we do know. We know, according to a purple band on Moxie's leg, he came from a breeder in Florida. He was purchased in Florida too by a woman who clearly knew nothing about birds. Moxie is housed in a 2x2 cage. That's bad enough. But to add on to that, he was fed nothing but junk food. And we're not talking just seeds. We're talking seeds, bread, fatty meats, mashed potatoes, lots of red flags. But eventually, Moxie was rehomed to a police officer and taken to Michigan. He lived with the officer for 2 years until he was put up for adoption once again. I was lucky enough to stumble across him on a website called petclassifieds.com, and the officer was only asking $600 for him. So after some back and forth texting, me and my mom drove all the way up to Marysville, Michigan to pick Moxie up. When we got him home, we noticed some more red flags. He was underweight and he had cement perches in his cage. But after buying some new supplies and crushing some Lefebvre pellets into mush with chopped fruits and veggies, Moxie now has the happiest home with us. Our last story begins with Meyer. I know what you'll be thinking. Why would you buy animals? We wanted to welcome fish into our home, or our sanctuary as we call it now. Unfortunately, we couldn't really find any fish rescues, and we didn't want to support any large pet stores either. So we chose Meyer. Never again. We got 4 neon tetras that had cherry barb, and I can say right now their health improved as soon as we got them out of those Meyer tanks. These store tanks were filthy. Goldfish were crammed together, and there was at least 1 dead fish in almost all the tanks. Bait dish stored in kitchen Tupperware? I know there are people out there that say, it's just a fish. But do you really want to walk up to a large fish tank to see beautiful creatures diseased or even belly up dead? What about the children? I can only imagine how crushed a child would be to see their favorite animal dead in front of them. But buying those fish only proved my point more. The point why you should never contribute to a business that sees any animal as only a disposable material item. So please, don't contribute to the suffering of domestic animals. Always adopt, never shop, spay and neuter your cats and dogs, and please don't take on an animal unless you are ready to commit to their care. And anytime you see animal abuse happening, report it to your local law enforcement and animal control. And now it's time for our guest speaker to join us today. We have Cami from a group that I'm part of called the Raven Corps, an animal liberation group. Hi, Cami.
Hello.
So, Cami, I have a few questions to ask you. So Claire told me that you have some experience with rescuing animals.
Yes, I do.
All right. So, let me ask you a couple things. First off, what inspired you to rescue animals?
That's always been kind of a hard question to answer because it's one of those things where for pretty much my whole life I've been drawn to our non-human animal friends, and it really kind of solidified into action probably when I was in middle school. I was just very drawn to specifically like animals that got a bad rap or weren't generally protected, or recognized as worthy of protection. And it started off with pit bulls specifically. I
love pit bulls.
About that. Yeah. So that's how it started for me, and then from there it really just, once you start learning about like atrocities within the great big world of animal abuse, it kind of just keeps going. And before I knew it, I was involved with like pig rescues and like animals from labs and all of that. But it started with pit bulls for me, to answer your question in a long-winded way.
I honestly don't know where it started for me, but recently my obsession has been with cockatoos and mice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't think enough people really care about cockatoos and mice. So it's great that you're passionate about it.
Yeah, like I've been hearing that cockatoos are, like everyone says, that they're the most hardest parrot to take care of, and that I had someone else call me brave one time for actually willing to have a cockatoo in my home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What someone else, I'm in this parrot group on Discord, and they complimented me for his feather quality, and they said that it's like really rare to see a cockatoo with good feather quality because of
Mm.
how easily they can get stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
I'm glad
Mox.
he has a good home with you.
Yeah, he's doing really well.
Nice.
Yeah. So, how many different times have you really rescued animals?
Um, I don't know. I don't really keep track. I mean, the main ones that stand out to me, there are three that really stand out in my mind. Two of them are dogs, and one of them is a pig. Uh, I can elaborate a little bit if you like, but yeah, two dogs and a pig are the real standout stories for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might actually go along with our next question. I was gonna ask you, you've heard some of the things that I like, some of the things I saw when I was rescuing animals, and so that brings me to my next question. What were some of the scariest experiences you had while doing these rescues?
Mm. Um, I mean, I think the scariest experiences I've had relating to like animal cruelty were not necessarily part of like me personally rescuing the animal. Like I would say those situations that were really scary were more at say like a vigil or an action event that took place at a place of animal cruelty and exploitation, like at a slaughterhouse or at a farm or something like that. Um, like for instance, I've been part of a couple of the kind of like mass open rescues that the group Direct Action Everywhere has done, and in those situations, I wasn't personally like having my hands on an animal and like rescuing them from say like whatever farm we were at, but those were probably the situations that felt the most high stakes with like cops and SWAT teams and all of that getting involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen videos of stuff like that, and like it's incredible how brave you guys can be, but at the same time it scares me. Like,
Yeah, it's pretty unnerving, but it definitely, especially with those mass open rescue events, I think just the sheer amount of numbers and solidarity really helps with combating that fear and just knowing that you're all in it together.
so after that, what were some of the most rewarding experiences you've had?
Mm. I mean, probably the rescues that I mentioned. The the pig was like my first time kind of personally coordinating a farmed animal rescue, because I have in my living situation, sadly I can't keep any quote unquote farmed animals, but I found there was this ad posting on Craigslist of someone who just like had this big old potbelly pig in their yard, and they were saying they're either going to give her away for free or they would just shoot her. And yeah, I just like jumped right in there. I'm like, do not shoot this pig, and I don't want someone to take this pig who will, you know, like keep her just to slaughter her and potentially eat her. So I was able to get in touch with, back when I was living in Southern California, I was very, and still am to some degree, very connected with like the farmed animal sanctuaries down there, and I was able to find one that was willing to take her in, and rented a U-Haul trailer, went up there. She was very unsocialized, and it took a big team to actually like get her to where she needed to go. But to this day, she is living it up at a sanctuary in Southern California, and that was maybe 2017 was that one. So yeah, that was very gratifying. The stories of the two dogs, though, that jump to mind are maybe a little bit more, for me, like much more close-hitting and emotionally gratifying, just because those beings did in fact live with me and stay with me and had a very big impact on me. Yeah.
So, what exactly happened with the dogs? Like, how'd you get them?
Yeah, so with the dogs, it's two different stories, happened at two different times. The first one was just like her name was Tilly. I found her at like the local pound. She was 9 years old, a big old like Mastiff Pit Bull mix. Got all sorts of like lumps and bumps on her. She was incontinent, kind of just like sitting in her own piss, just like in really, really, she was not doing well in the situation that she was in, and was clearly not being well taken care of at this facility, which was true for a lot of the dogs there, but I think there's a certain amount of neglect, especially with the older special needs dogs that have a lot of medical issues. Like she had a bloody toe because she was like dragging her legs from some sort of arthritis. Her nose was all crusted over with something. And of course I just like saw her and I'm like, wow, I love you so much. And I took her out into a play yard, got to know her, and she just was like, yeah, we kind of just instantly had this, I don't know what to call it, like a soul connection or something.
I think that's a good word to describe it.
Yeah, and like it felt right because I kind of had just like stopped by the shelter on a whim that day because I was in like a pretty rough period of my life and was kind of keeping an eye out for a potential companion. And yeah, I just like was driving home from school and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stop by the shelter today, because that was just like a thing I did sometimes anyway, and met Tilly. So yeah, I took her in, and she just like kind of immediately turned around. And I think that's true with so many shelter dogs. It's like as soon as you get them out of that environment, like that stress of just constant stimulation and sometimes terrible living conditions, like they're gonna turn around so fast, and their personality really comes out. And I think a lot of people don't give shelter dogs that chance because they just see who they are in a cage, essentially. But yeah, I had a few really, really great years with Tilly because she was already very old, so she didn't have much time left. But I still think about her like pretty much every day. She passed away right at the end of 2019. But she really taught me a lot. I think we kind of needed each other and found each other at the right time. That was Tilly, and the other is my current rescue baby. Well, one of my 3 dogs, but he's like, this one's my baby boy. Theo. He is a rescue from. He's a beagle and was rescued from an animal testing lab.
Aww.
Yeah. So one of the sanctuaries that I am pretty close with, Farm Animal Refuge, they rescue animals from animal testing labs pretty often. Like they have some connections so they can do that kind of work. And at one point they reached out to me and said, hey, we are pulling 3 beagles from this lab. Would you like to take one in? And it was another one of those weird universe moments where I happen to be keeping an eye out for an animal companion, and I was like, wow, this is kind of perfect timing. And I got to meet him when he went outside for the first time, straight from the lab to a van and then to where I met them. And again, kind of similarly to Tilly, I mean, it took him a lot longer to really come out of his shell because he was living in an animal testing lab for 6 years. So fortunately, he did not have a lot of like physical effects or physical consequences from whatever they were doing to him in the lab. Whereas the other two dogs, they suffer a lot from like seizures and some issues with like epilepsy and those kind of things. Whereas with Theo, I mean, we were prepared for him to have those kinds of issues because that's extremely common with beagles coming from labs. But he's actually fine on the physical front. It's the psychological trauma just ran so deep with him, and it took months and months and months, which when you consider 6 years, it's still pretty quick to like turn around in less than a year. But yeah, for the longest time, he would not even touch like soft surfaces because cold, hard cement and like metal were the only things that he knew. Like he wouldn't sleep on a blanket if it was offered to him. He would prefer the concrete floors. Yeah, just terrified. But now he's like a total jerk, and I love him. he's found his personality, and it is telling people who's boss, but also like pretending he's the most innocent little being ever and would never hurt a fly. And he's great. He's just full of spunk, and it's incredible. He also, one other little fact about that story, he came from a place called Marshall's Bioresources, I believe, which Petco actually carries a lot of products that are owned by this company, and Marshall's Bioresources has a beagle farm essentially in New York, and it is the biggest I believe it's the biggest animal like supplier of animals for animal testing in the country. Like they have over like 25,000 beagles at this farm at any given time, and that's where Theo was born. Yeah.
Just hearing that story ended up bringing me back to when I read about the 4,000 beagles that were liberated from a lab. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I sure did.
Yeah,
I signed up to potentially take one in, but it never panned out.
Yeah, one of them got to play in this year's Puppy Bowl. Briscoe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, I didn't see the Puppy Bowl this year because sadly I don't have the channel that has that. But yeah, I saw it online that he got to play and be adopted out.
Oh, there's an animal sanctuary called Kindness Ranch that I would love to visit one day because, I mean, I feel this way about like most animal sanctuaries, but this place has they played a really big role in that rescue, and they have lots and lots of beagles rescued from animal testing labs on their property, in addition to like all the other farmed animal rescues and stuff. It just seems like such a magical place.
There's a place here in Michigan that I've been trying to maybe adopt a mouse or maybe a rat from called Wild Whiskers. They just rescued 143 hens from slaughter.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I told the person who owns the place that she needs to check you guys out.
Yeah, there's the like direct action in general is just so important, but especially in the form of actually rescuing the animals that we're advocating for. And I feel like it's a part of the work that often kind of is underfunded and unaddressed sometimes in the world of animal activism, where it's like, yeah, farmed animal rescues are vitally important to this work, and it's important that we support them.
I'll have to post a link on the Discord server when I get a chance to her Facebook page.
Yeah, I'd love to check it out.
Alright, I could send it to you too after this. So, alright, what's your advice for, like, adopting or rescuing animals?
I mean, first and foremost, definitely just essentially, like, check yourself. I mean, it's easy to kind of glamorize, is that right? Or glorify animal rescue work and kind of like think it's all sunshine and happiness and rainbows, which it can be for sure. And it can also be, and often is, extremely difficult emotionally, sometimes even physically, financially, all the things. So it's really important to just know your own limits and know your own, like, resources that you have available, and just, like, know as much as you possibly can about the animal or animals that you're interested in adopting or rescuing, because that is sadly often, like, what puts a lot of animals in a situation where they need to be rescued is someone has taken this animal upon themselves and just doesn't know how to take care of them. So yeah, just really knowing what resources and abilities you have and the needs of the being that you are trying to help out.
Yeah, reason we say adopt, don't shop too is because pet stores can also encourage that too. They get someone to buy an animal they have no knowledge on, and then when it turns out the animal is more than what they thought it was, they end up dumping them.
Oh yeah, because those places, it's just all about
All
making
about the
those
money.
profits. Yeah. Also, okay, this is related. I feel like I have to say this any chance I get. Teacup pigs, they do not exist. They just grow into bigger pigs, and if they don't, they are extremely, like, they're malnourished, they're messed up, they're not supposed to be that small, and they're gonna suffer. Everybody does it.
I read something about that before, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about other species or quote-unquote pets that are marketed as, like, being miniature or teacup sized. I'm sure there's something fishy going on.
It's usually
in most
inbreeding
of those situations. But yeah, generally animals that are not meant to be tiny do not stay tiny, and if they do, it is usually to the detriment of that individual. So don't support stuff like that.
Yeah, like, have you ever heard of the teacup chihuahuas?
Aren't they already teacups? Are they making them smaller?
Apparently they've done something like that. Like, they bred them to make them smaller, and I've, like, seen pictures of them with, like, just huge heads, and it's like their eyes look like they're about to pop out of their sockets.
Oh my gosh.
Like pugs.
Yeah, it's not good. And yeah, I mean, I can imagine with most of those cases. I mean, as far as I know, with honestly a lot of the rescue pigs that I have met that are, like, living on farm sanctuaries, a lot of them don't even come from animal agriculture. They come from, like, situations where they were supposed to be someone's quote-unquote pet, but they got too big because the person thought they were going to stay tiny, and it never happens because that's not how pigs work.
Yeah, that just reminds me too, like, about, like, inbreeding animals. Like a while ago, I used to think that was just dogs until I discovered Munchkin cats are inbred. And then I discovered people have figured out how to inbreed parrots and fish. Yeah. like the
Ugh.
the Lutino cockatiels, the goldfish with the
Mm.
eyes that stick up, like they're always positioned upward.
Oy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like in general, adopt, don't shop. Know what you're signing up for, and maybe don't support people who are still breeding animals when there are so many that already need homes that are already alive.
I'm gonna throw this in here too. Like I've had to mention this to people before. So I've had to mention to people that adopting can be cheaper than buying the animal from a pet store or a breeder too.
Oh yeah, I mean definitely with like the initial cost,
Yeah.
because usually breeders will charge like thousands.
Like
But even later down the road, like if you're buying a purebred of some sort, they're almost always going to have some sort of like medical complications because that just comes with being purebred.
yes.
Which, not saying that rescue dogs don't have medical issues, they certainly can, but it's almost guaranteed if you're buying a purebred.
And as I said before too, many good rescues will tell you if a dog or if any animal has a health problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
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 Like I've told people about Moxie. As I mentioned earlier, I got him for only $600 when I could have bought him from a breeder to like well up to 7,000. And recently too, I saw my local animal shelter here in Reed City, Michigan. They just got like 3 purebred corgis they rescued, and they only charge like $5 to $35 for their animals. And the only reason they only like charge like up to $35 is if they're not spayed or neutered. And if you adopt an animal from these guys that isn't spayed or neutered, and you get that procedure done and come back to the shelter with proof of procedure, they'll refund you at least like $25 or more.
Oh wow. That's nice. Yeah, it's nice to, whether it's adopting from like a shelter or even directly from like a rescue organization or a nonprofit. Yeah, it can save a lot of money, but more importantly, it's like you know that the animal really needs this, and your money isn't going towards something that will perpetuate this cycle of like neglect and cruelty.
Yeah. Plus, like I said, if it's a really good place too, you know what's going on too. Nothing's really sugar coated.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up with one more question. Cami, why should people help animals?
Ugh, why shouldn't people help animals? I mean, I think like, to bring it back to the Raven Corps, we are very much a collective liberation organization, just generally against oppression, whether it's of humans, oppression of our planet, our environment, and oppression of our non-human animals that we share this planet with. And I think if anyone, I keep like stopping myself from cussing because I don't know what the policy is here, but if anybody cares about literally any sort of issue of justice, I personally believe that you should also care about the issue of animal justice and caring for animals, because their oppression is, you can't really separate it from oppression of humans or oppression of the planet, because at the end of the day it's all kind of tied up in this same foundational root of believing that certain lives are worth more than other lives. And if we keep believing that, no matter what the context is, whether it is believing that like one race is worth more than another race, or believing that one species is inherently worth more than other species, like that kind of wherever that belief exists, oppression will continue to exist, is basically what I'm getting at. And yeah, it's important to address it in every way that you possibly and practically can, including with caring about our animal pals, because they're pretty great, generally speaking, and very worthy of protection.
Yeah, that reminds. I'm gonna go and throw something in here too before we wrap this up. So I could say the same thing there. As I say, animals are supposed to bring out the best in people, and I've seen a lot of things about animal abuse being linked to domestic violence and higher crimes too. Like the recent school shootings we've had. The ones that I know of the most, the Oxford school shooting here in Michigan and the elementary school shooting in Texas. Both shooters were documented to be cruel to animals. The one in Oxford, that Ethan Crumbly, I think that's his name. It was reported that he had he had the severed head of a bird in his bedroom for 6 months. And then and then the other kid, the one who shot up the elementary school in Texas, there was a picture found of him on social media of him holding up a bag with the bodies of 2 cats covered in their own blood.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I think to the point that you said of how animals can bring out the best in people, I think it's both ends of the spectrum. Like, animals
that too.
Can bring out the best, or they can bring out the worst, and I think that's often
I shouldn't have exactly said that.
No, but it is true. Like, animals do often bring out the best in people, and at the same time they can do the exact opposite, just depending on kind of the mental state of the person. And I am kicking myself because I'm forgetting who says this, but it's the quote that you can kind of tell where a society is at based on how it treats its most vulnerable. And I think that kind of speaks to what we're talking about here, which is like, when you are presented with a vulnerable individual that you have some sort of power over, does that bring out the best in you? Does it bring out like your humanity, your compassion, your empathy, or does it bring out a part of you that just wants to dominate and oppress and like exert control over this individual? And like, I think that that just says a lot about the individual and the context and the culture that they're growing up in.
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a personal story too. So I have a 7-year, I'm not sure if I ever told you about my 7-year-old nephew, but he's got ADHD, and there have been I've actually noticed the animal abuse leading up into more violent things with him, because there was times when he was 4 years old, he put a cat in his backpack and slammed the backpack against the wall and beat the backpack with a stick. He didn't severely injure the cat, thank goodness, but yeah, he did that. He is also mean to a puppy dog. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. That's just why I heard that he is mean to it. And then there was also times we've caught him in the woods in our home we just moved into. We'd catch him stabbing frogs with sticks, frogs and toads with sticks. And then we could notice this behavior moving up to his own classmates in his kindergarten class. So we've gotten calls from his teacher and stuff about him kicking other students, pulling hair of his female classmates. There was one time he kicked someone's Chromebook, so yeah, we can actually see the escalation from animals to people right there, and just a young boy too.
Yeah, I mean, it's alarming because it's you said he has ADHD, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that story sounds like kind of a reflection of so many of these stories that we hear of people who are kind of in some way or another, either a part of their identity or multiple parts of their identity are kind of like squashed by society, or they're like not treated well systemically, or just like by their family or whatever it may be. And that just kind of, that neglect can come out in some really ugly ways. And I think that's, yeah, we don't really have these measures, I think, in place that really help the individuals that need help, to put it very generally speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After we saw this behavior escalate in my nephew, I'd start doing things like I'd get coloring pages, animal friendly coloring sheets off of some animal activist groups that like the PETA Kids. I would get coloring pages from them. I'd color them together with my nephew. I'd read comic books to animals about him. I'd let him interact with the pets, well, the animals that I have, under my supervision to make sure he didn't hurt them. Like, to help him, like, relearn, like, compassion and, like, not to be violent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice that you're attempting to, like, intervene in some way, because, yeah, you clearly see that you notice that there's a pattern here, and not a pattern that we want to escalate any more than it already has. And it'd be nice if more people were that observant. Like, we might not have a lot of the really disturbing situations of violence that kind of plague our news today if more people attempted to meet that kind of behavior with compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
And relearning.
As I say, like, this might just be a theory, but then again, I'm pretty sure other people could agree with me on this. I've said to people that, like, when it comes to like being like young and being with animals, or like animal abuse in general, as I say to people that what happens to these like kinds of people, like, when they abuse animals, it seems as if they develop a toxic mindset that they can get away with hurting anyone without consequence because they managed to get away with doing it to a mouse or a frog. So then this like toxic mindset develops more, and they like go on to bigger victims, eventually leading to a human victim.
Yeah, it's like clockwork sometimes. And, like, to be clear, I don't think that when I'm talking about, say, like meeting these things with compassion and empathy, I'm not suggesting that we, like, hold the hands of someone who's, like, shot up a school or something like that. I'm suggesting that we recognize, like, exactly what you are doing. We recognize someone who is clearly going down a bad path, and try to meet whatever needs that are not being met before it gets to that point of committing some act of extreme violence.
Yes, stop the problem before it starts.
Yeah, more or less.
All right, well, that's about everything we have for this podcast. Thank you, Cami, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me on. I had a good time.
This was Animal Rescue Horrors. Remember, adopt, don't shop, and always be compassionate. Thank you very much, and we'll see you later.